I remember the exact moment I stopped feeling like I belonged in my own home. It wasn't a big argument. There were no broken dishes, no screaming, no dramatic scene that you could point to and say, that's where it all fell apart. It was a dinner table, a Sunday afternoon, and a 10-year-old girl rolling her eyes at me like I was something embarrassing she had stepped on by accident. I had walked into the dining room carrying a bowl of salad I had just made, because I always made the salad on Sundays. That was my small contribution, my little ritual, and I went to pull out the chair next to my stepdaughter, Maya. She looked at me, then she looked at her cousins sitting across from her. And then she said it, "You can't sit with us, Mom says you're boring." The whole table laughed, my wife laughed. My brother-in-law laughed. Even Maya's little friend, who was visiting for the afternoon, covered her mouth and giggled. And I stood there, holding a bowl of salad, in a house that had my name on the mortgage, surrounded by people who were supposed to be my family, and I felt like a stranger who had wandered in from the street. I didn't say anything. I just set the bowl down quietly. I pulled out a different chair, the one at the far end of the table, the one nobody usually wanted because it wobbled slightly, and I sat down alone. And I ate my salad in silence. That night, at 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand, and it was a text message. "Dad, don't forget about tomorrow." I stared at that message for a long, long time, and what happened the next day, I could never have prepared myself for it. My name is Gerald Hutchins. I am 63 years old, and I have the kind of face that people forget at parties but remember when they need something fixed. I spent 38 years working as a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I know how to fix boilers, rewire electrical panels, and patch concrete floors. I do not know how to give speeches or make people laugh at dinner tables. I am not a funny man. I know that. I am not a man who tells stories about his adventures or drops clever jokes between bites of food. I am the kind of man who shows up early and leaves late. The kind of man who fixes the broken thing before anyone notices it was broken. The kind of man who checks the tire pressure on his wife's car every Sunday morning without being asked. I am apparently boring. I found that out on a Sunday afternoon in October. But let me go back further. Let me tell you how I got to that dinner table. I married my wife, Diane, 11 years ago. She was 44 when we met, and I was 52. She had been divorced for 3 years, and she had 2 children from her first marriage, Maya, who was just a baby then, not even a year old, and her older son, Derek, who was 16 at the time. When Diane and I started dating, Derek barely looked at me. He was polite in the way teenagers are polite when they're told to be polite, flat eyes, one-word answers, always somewhere else to be. I didn't push. I knew I wasn't his father, and I knew that 16-year-old boys don't exactly welcome a new man into the house with a handshake and a warm smile. I just showed up. Every time. I showed up to his basketball games, even when Diane couldn't make it because of her work schedule. I showed up when his car broke down at midnight, and he called the house phone because his cell battery had died, and I drove 40 minutes in the rain to bring him home. I showed up when he failed his junior year English class and needed to retake it in summer school, and I sat with him at the kitchen table every evening for 6 weeks going through the reading assignments with him, even though I'm not a literature man, even though half the time I understood the books about as well as he did. Derek graduated. He went to a state college. He came home for holidays. He never called me Dad. He called me Gerald, which was fine. That was always fine. And little Maya, she was different. She was mine from the beginning, in the way that babies are yours before the world teaches them otherwise. I was the one who stayed up with her when she had ear infections. I was the one who taught her to ride her bike in the parking lot of the church down the street. I was the one who sat through 47 viewings of the same animated movie because she wanted to watch it every Saturday morning and would only fall asleep if I was there on the couch beside her. She used to call me Daddy, past tense. She stopped around age 7, after she started spending more weekends at her biological father's house. His name is Ron. Ron is 38 years old, drives a sports car, and works in real estate. Ron tells very good jokes at dinner tables. Ron is not boring. I understand. I do. But understanding something doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. The Sunday of the dinner, the Sunday of the salad, and the eye roll, and the laughter, was not the first time something like that had happened. It was just the day something broke inside me. The gathering was for Diane's sister, Patricia, who was visiting from Atlanta with her husband, Michael, and their 3 teenage kids. Patricia and I had never been warm to each other. She was the kind of woman who sized people up in 30 seconds and never revised her opinion. From the moment Diane introduced us, I could see it in her eyes. Oh, this is who she settled for. Michael was fine. Quiet like me. We had sat together at many of these family gatherings over the years, watching football or talking about the weather. 2 men who understood that sometimes you just have to be in the room without trying to dominate it. It was a full house that afternoon. Patricia's kids were loud in the good way that young people are loud. Diane had made her famous baked chicken, and the kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary. And for an hour before everyone sat down, I actually felt good about the day. I made the salad. I always made the salad. Romaine, cherry tomatoes, cucumber, red onion, a homemade vinaigrette that I'd perfected over years. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I carried it to the table, and Maya looked up at me and said those words. You can't sit with us. Mom says you're boring. I want to stop here for a second and describe the silence that followed the laughter. Because there was a silence, a brief one, a 2-second window where the air in the room changed slightly, where even Patricia seemed to sense that something had landed wrong. Michael's eyes flicked to me and then away. One of the teenage cousins stopped laughing first, but Diane, my wife, she was still smiling when her eyes met mine. It wasn't a mean smile. That's what made it worse. It was an "oh, kids" smile, a dismissive "he'll be fine, let's not make this a thing" smile. She turned back to the conversation she had been having with Patricia, and I sat at the far end of the table, and I ate my salad. Nobody talked to me much for the rest of the meal. That was not unusual. In these gatherings, I was always more of a background presence. I refilled drinks. I cleared plates. I fixed the wobbly leg on Patricia's chair when she mentioned it was bothering her. I was useful. I was just not interesting. After dinner, the women went to the living room and the men went to watch the game. I did the dishes. Nobody asked me to. I just did them. By 8 o'clock, I was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I was tired in a deep, bone-level way that comes from years of swallowing small hurts without making a sound. I said good night to everyone. Patricia nodded at me. Michael shook my hand and said, "Good to see you, Gerald." I appreciated that more than he knew. Diane kissed my cheek without looking at me. I went to bed. I was not asleep at 11:47 p.m. I almost never sleep well anymore. At my age, the night becomes a long conversation between you and every worry you've been carrying during the day. I lay there in the dark, on my side of the bed, listening to Diane breathing beside me, and I thought about the dinner table. I thought about a word, boring. I turned it over in my mind the way you turn over a rock to see what's underneath. Was I boring? I thought about the 38 years at the plant. Was that boring? Maybe, but it had paid for this house. It had paid for Maya's school supplies and Derek's college application fees and Diane's car and 3 family vacations. and the new kitchen cabinets that Patricia had complimented without knowing who installed them. I thought about being boring, and then my phone buzzed. I reached for it in the dark, expecting nothing important. Maybe a spam message, maybe a weather alert. It was from a number I didn't immediately recognize. Dad, don't forget about tomorrow. I stared at it. Dad, my heart did something complicated. I looked at the number again, and slowly, very slowly, something in the back of my mind connected the dots. I had this number saved somewhere, not under a name I would have thought to look for, not under something obvious. I sat up in bed. I opened my contacts and searched, and there it was. The name attached to this number was simply D. Derek had texted me, and he had called me Dad. I read the message 3 more times. Don't forget about tomorrow. But tomorrow what? Derek hadn't said anything at dinner. He hadn't even been at dinner. I had assumed he was busy, assumed he had his own life, his own Sunday. He lived about 40 minutes away now, in an apartment with his girlfriend. I typed back, slowly, I won't forget. Get some rest. I didn't know what I was agreeing to. I didn't know what tomorrow was. But something told me to just say yes. The next day, I was up at 5:30 in the morning, the way I always am. Old habits from the plant, the early shift had rewired my body clock permanently. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of the house before anyone else woke up, and I looked at my phone. At 7 a.m., Derek called. Gerald. He used my name, like always. You're up. Been up since 5:30, I said. There was a pause. Then, can you come? I know it's early. I know yesterday was. I know it was a long day for you, but I need you to come. Where? I asked. He gave me an address. It was on the other side of Columbus, in a part of the city I didn't know well. Derek, I said, what's going on? Another pause, longer this time. I'll explain when you get here. Just, please come. And Gerald, yeah, thank you for everything, for all of it. He hung up. I sat there for a moment. Then I put on my jacket and picked up my keys. I didn't wake Diane. I drove 45 minutes through a gray October morning, through neighborhoods that were just beginning to stir, past coffee shops with their lights on, and parks with frost still on the grass. I followed the address on my phone's navigation. It brought me to a hospital. My chest tightened. I parked and walked through the main entrance, asked at the front desk for Derek's name. The woman behind the desk looked at me with careful eyes. Are you family? She asked. Yes, I said. Without hesitation, I'm his father. She gave me a room number. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and when I turned the corner and saw Derek standing in the hallway outside one of the rooms, I barely recognized him. He looked like he had been awake for 48 hours. His face was pale and raw, and when he saw me coming, he did something he had not done since he was 16 years old. He started to cry, not quietly, not politely. He folded in half and pressed his hands over his face and cried like a little boy. I didn't think. I just walked to him and put my arms around him. I've got you, I said. I'm here. He cried for a while. I held on. When he finally pulled back and wiped his face, he looked at me with the saddest eyes I have ever seen on a grown man. It's Carla, he said. Carla was his girlfriend, 27 years old. Sweet girl, nurse, always brought something when she came for dinner. What happened? I asked. He told me. Carla had been having headaches for 3 months. Headaches that she had chalked up to stress and long shifts at the hospital where she worked. Last Wednesday, she had collapsed in the break room. They had rushed her to the ER. The scans came back on Saturday morning. A brain tumor, rare, fast, moving, the kind with a difficult name and a short timeline. Carla was 27 years old, and she was in that room behind the closed door, and she had been awake since 6 in the morning asking for Derek, and Derek had been in that hallway alone since midnight because he didn't know who to call. He didn't call his mother. He didn't call his Uncle Michael. He called me, he texted me, "Dad, don't forget about tomorrow, because tomorrow was the day the specialist was coming. Tomorrow was the day the answers were supposed to arrive, and he didn't want to face it alone. He called me. I looked at this boy, this man who had never once called me Dad out loud, who had been cold and distant and careful with me for 11 years, and I understood something in that moment that I hadn't understood before. He had been watching me the whole time. All those years when he looked away, when he gave me one-word answers, when he acted like I wasn't in the room, he had been watching. Taking notes, filing things away. He just hadn't been ready to say it yet. I stayed. I didn't call Diane right away. I know that sounds wrong, but I needed to be present for Derek first, and I knew that if I called Diane, the whole family machinery would start moving. Patricia would want to come. Diane would want to be in charge of everything, and Derek would get lost in the middle of it. He needed something quieter than that. He needed just one person. He needed me. We sat in the hallway together, and he talked, and I listened. He told me about Carla, about how they had met 2 years ago, about how she laughed, about the small apartment they had decorated together, about how she made him coffee the way he liked it without him ever having to ask. He told me about his fear. He told me about the nights he had been lying awake. He told me about the guilt he felt for not making her see a doctor sooner, even though there was no way he could have known. I listened. I didn't offer solutions. I didn't minimize. I just sat with him in it. Around noon, the specialist came and went. The news was not the worst possible, but it was not good either. Surgery was recommended. There were options. There were risks. There were long roads ahead. Carla's parents arrived from Michigan in the early afternoon. They were warm, scared people who looked at Derek like he was the solid thing in a tilting world. I slipped out to the waiting room to give them privacy. I sat in one of those uncomfortable hospital chairs, and I drank vending machine coffee, and I thought about the dinner table the night before. "You can't sit with us. Mom says you're boring." I thought about Diane's smile. I thought about 38 years of getting up early and doing what needed to be done. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, like maybe I hadn't done it all for nothing. At 3 in the afternoon, Derek came and found me in the waiting room. He sat down beside me. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Then he said, "I heard what happened yesterday, at dinner." I looked at him. "Carla texted Maya before everything. Maya told her what she said to you, what my mom did." He shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry, Gerald. It's all right." I said, "No." He turned to look at me directly. "It's not, and I need you to know that I know that." He was quiet for a moment. "You've been there my whole life, every time. I was too proud and too stupid to say anything about it. But I always knew. I always saw it. I didn't know what to say. So I just nodded. I texted you last night," he said, "because you're the only person I knew would actually come." That was the moment. That was the sentence that broke something open inside me. Not in a bad way. In the way that a window breaks open on a hot day, and the fresh air finally gets in. I had to press my hand over my mouth for a moment, because 63 years of being a quiet man does not prepare you for being needed that loudly. I finally called Diane at 4 o'clock. She answered on the second ring. "Gerald, where are you? I woke up and your car was gone. I didn't even hear you leave." "I'm at Riverside Hospital," I said. "With Derek." A pause. "The hospital. What happened? Is Derek okay?" I told her about Carla, as clearly and calmly as I could. The silence on the other end of the phone was different from the silence at the dinner table. It was a shaken silence. A humbled one. "Oh my God," Diane whispered. "Oh, Derek. Why didn't he call me? I didn't answer that." She came. She brought Maya. Patricia and Michael had gone back to their hotel by then, but Diane texted them, and they came too. The hospital waiting room filled up. I watched Diane hold her son, and I watched him accept the comfort, but I also watched his eyes find me over her shoulder, and I gave him a small nod, and he gave me one back. It was our language. It had always been our language. Two quiet people who communicated in small, invisible ways. Later, when the visiting hours were winding down and the group was gathering coats and bags, Patricia pulled me aside. I braced myself, but what she said surprised me. Derek told us, she said, that he called you, that you were here all day. She looked at me with different eyes than I had ever seen on her face before. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, I said. She looked like she wanted to say something more. She pressed her lips together and nodded once and walked away. It was Maya who came to me on the drive home. Diane was driving. Maya was in the back seat. I was in the passenger seat, staring out at the dark road, tired in a good way now, the kind of tired that comes from being useful. Maya had been very quiet since we arrived at the hospital. She was 10 years old, and the situation with Carla had scared her, and she had stayed close to Diane all afternoon. About 20 minutes from home, she said in a small voice, "I'm sorry for what I said at dinner." I turned around in my seat to look at her. She was staring down at her hands, and her voice had that specific quality that children's voices have when they are saying something they've been rehearsing in their head for hours. "I don't actually think you're boring," she said. "Mom didn't actually say that. I just wanted to make the cousins laugh." She finally looked up. "That was mean." "Yes," I said. "It was. Are you mad at me?" I thought about it honestly, the way children deserve. "No," I said. "I'm not mad, but I want you to remember this feeling, the one you're feeling right now." "What feeling?" "The one that made you apologize." She was quiet. "That feeling is called a conscience," I said, "and the fact that you have it, the fact that it was bothering you all day, that tells me a lot about who you really are." Diane said nothing from the driver's seat, but I could see her hands shift slightly on the steering wheel. "Derek calls you Dad sometimes," Maya said suddenly in his phone. I saw it once. "I know," I said. "Can I call you that again, if I want to?" I had to look back out at the road for a moment. "Yes," I said. "If you want to." She didn't say anything else for the rest of the drive. But when we got home and I got out of the car, she reached up and took my hand briefly as we walked up the front path. Just for a second, like she used to do when she was very small. Just for a second, that was enough. That night, after Maya was in bed, Diane and I sat at the kitchen table. The same kitchen table. There was no salad this time. Just 2 cups of tea going cold between us. Diane looked older than she had that morning. Not in a bad way. In the way that people look older when something real has happened and the performance of the day has fallen away. "I should have said something yesterday," she said. When Maya said that, "Yes," I said, "you should have. I didn't realize how it landed, Diane." I said her name quietly and she stopped. "I'm not going to argue with you tonight. I'm too tired for that. But I need you to hear me say something, and I need you to actually hear it." She looked at me. "I have been in this house for 11 years, I said. "I have never once asked for recognition. I have never once asked anyone to make a speech about what I do or who I am. That is not the kind of man I am. But there is a difference between not needing to be celebrated and being made to feel like a piece of furniture." I looked at my hands. "Yesterday at that table, that is how I felt. And the fact that you laughed not because you were trying to hurt me, I know that, but because you didn't think it mattered enough to stop." My voice was steady. I was proud of that. That hurt more than the words did. Diane was crying, quietly, in the way she cried, just her eyes, no sounds. "I know," she said. "I know. I'm sorry. Derek called me today," I said, "because he thought I would come. Not because I'm interesting, not because I'm funny, because he knew I would come." I looked at her. That's all I've ever tried to be, someone who comes when he's called. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I let her. "Gerald," she said, "you are not boring. You are the most steady person I have ever known, and I think I've been taking that for granted for a very long time. I think so too, I said. Not to punish her, just because it was true. We sat like that for a while, two people at a kitchen table who had some work to do, but who were, underneath everything, still on the same side. I could live with that. Carla had her surgery 3 weeks later. It went well. Not perfectly, these things never go perfectly, but the surgeon was cautiously optimistic. And Carla woke up and knew Derek's name and asked for water and then asked what day it was, and Derek called me from outside the recovery room and said, "She's awake, Gerald. She's awake." And he was crying again, the good kind this time. I sat in my car in the driveway and cried a little too, where no one could see. During those 3 weeks, something shifted in our family. Slowly, carefully, the way ice shifts in spring, not all at once, but undeniably. Patricia called me before she flew back to Atlanta. She apologized for 11 years of not seeing me clearly. She didn't elaborate much, and I didn't need her to. I just thanked her for calling. Michael sent me a text that said, "You're a good man, Gerald. Derek is lucky." They all are. 3 sentences, from a man of few words to another man of few words. It meant everything. Maya started doing something new. Every morning when I came downstairs to make coffee, she would already be at the table doing her homework. And she would look up and say, "Good morning, Dad." Every morning. Not because anyone told her to, just because she wanted to. I started sleeping better. About a month after the surgery, when Carla was home and recovering, Derek drove over on a Saturday afternoon. Just him, no particular reason, just to sit for a while. We ended up in the garage, the way men do, not talking much, just existing in the same space. I was working on a small repair job, fixing the motor on Diane's old garden tiller. Derek sat on a stool and watched. After a long silence, he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, not looking up. "Why did you stay, all those years when I was cold to you, when Maya was rude, when this family didn't always, when we didn't always deserve it?" He paused. "Why did you stay?" I thought about it for a while. "Because leaving is easy," I said finally. "Anyone can leave. Staying when it's difficult, when you're not being seen, when you're sitting at the end of the table, that takes something different." "What does it take?" "Decision." I said, "Every day you decide, and I decided that this was my family, even when my family didn't fully decide it back." Derek was quiet. "That's not easy," he said. "No," I said, "it's not. How did you do it without getting bitter?" I put down my wrench and looked at him. "I got sad sometimes," I said honestly, "but bitterness is a thing you choose, same as staying, same as forgiving. They're all choices." I picked the wrench back up. "I just kept choosing the ones I could live with." He nodded slowly. Then, very simply, he said, "Thanks, Dad," out loud. Just like that. First time in 11 years. I went back to the tiller, but I was smiling. "I want to talk to you directly for a moment. If you are Gerald in this story, if you are the quiet one, the one who fixes things without being thanked, the one who sits at the end of the table and swallows the hurt, I want you to hear this. Your steadiness is not weakness. Your silence is not defeat. The people who mistake your patience for emptiness are simply not paying close enough attention. Keep going. Keep showing up. The people who matter will eventually see." And if you are Derek in this story, if there is a quiet person in your life who has been there every time, the one who drives at midnight, who fixes the broken things, who sits in hospital waiting rooms without being asked, please don't wait for a crisis to tell them what they mean to you. Go tell them today. Right now, after this video, go tell them. And if you are Maya, if you are young enough that you still have time to unlearn the habit of dismissing the people who are boring and steady and always there, please listen to that conscience. The one that kept you awake, The one that made you apologize in the back seat of a car. That voice knows something. Trust it. And if you are Diane, if you love someone deeply, but have stopped seeing them clearly, if you have laughed at the wrong moment or failed to speak up when you should have, it is not too late. It is almost never too late, but the time to start is now, not later, not when the hospital calls, now. The most dangerous lie we tell ourselves is that the people who are always there will always be there. They will not. Quiet men get tired. Patient people run out of patience. The ones who never complain are often the ones who are quietly preparing to walk away for good. Don't find out the hard way. Am 60, 3 years old. I have never been the most interesting man in any room. I cannot tell jokes that make tables full of people laugh. I cannot drive a sports car or close real estate deals. I cannot do a lot of the things that make other men seem exciting and worth paying attention to, but I can show up. I showed up at 5:30 in the morning and drove to a hospital because a boy who had never called me dad out loud sent me a text message in the dark, and some part of him trusted that I would come. I showed up, and that is the only story I know how to tell. Funny thing about boring people is this: when the world falls apart, and at some point for everyone the world falls apart, nobody calls the exciting one. Nobody texts the person who makes them laugh at dinner. They call the one who will come. Make sure somebody can call you. And make sure you pick up. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone in your life, someone quiet, someone steady, someone who always shows up without being asked, please share this video with them. Let them know you see them, and if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Every week, we bring you stories like this one, real, human, and from the heart. Because the most powerful stories are the ones that remind us how to treat each other before it's too late. Thank you for being here. Take care of the people who take care of you.